السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. أهلا بكم مشاهدينا إلى الجلسة الرابعة والأخيرة من المؤتمر الذي ينظمه مركز الجزيرة للدراسات بالتعاون مع
Good
قناة
evening.
الجزيرة
We're going to be
المباشر
starting
تحت
now.
عنوان
So the
سد
presenter
النهضة
is
بين التسوية
introducing the
التفاوضية
topic now.
والمواجهة
So this
العسكرية.
is about
الجلسة
the
الرابعة
Renaissance
والأخيرة
Dam.
التي تأتي
It is
بعنوان النفع
between
المتبادل
a
إخراج السد من
negotiation-based
معادلة الحلول الصفرية.
solution and a
تناقش
military
هذه الجلسة
confrontation.
مسارات بديلة
So
لتسوية
the
النزاع وتراعي
session is
مصالح
going
الأطراف
to
الثلاث
look
وتجنب
into the
منطقة
interests of the
القرن
three
الإفريقي والبحر
parties
الأحمر
in order to
اضطرابات
avoid
جسيمة.
any
لمناقشة هذا
instabilities in
الموضوع
the Horn of Africa
يسعدنا أن
and the
نرحب
Red Sea
بضيوفنا
region.
معنا
We would like to
عبر
welcome
سكايب
our
لوس
guests. Please
أنجلس
stand by.
رافائيل
You're going to
لابين
be
خبير
introduced
التفاوض
now.
وحل النزاعات في جنوب إفريقيا، ومن مدينة بوردو الفرنسية جون مارتن خبير في مفاوضات
gentlemen, you're being
بالشرق
introduced now.
الأوسط. رحبوا بي. ومن أديس أبابا ويليام ديفنسون مدير برنامج القرن الأفريقي
Mr. Davison, you're
ومجموعة
being
الأزمات
introduced.
الدولية. ويلحق بنا بعد قليل الدكتور عصام حجي عالم الفضاء المصري بوكالة ناسا الأمريكية.
Al-Hajji is going to be joining us a few minutes later. Gentlemen, we're going to be starting with this fourth session of this conference.
النفع المتبادل إخراج السد من معادلة الحلول الصفرية.
We'll start with Mr. Raphael. We're starting with you. What are the possibilities that this conflict might lead to more confrontations in the Red Sea region? Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. First, I'd like to extend my gratitude to Al Jazeera Center for Studies for allowing me this opportunity to share my thoughts and ideas on an issue of such great importance and impact, and indeed one close to my heart. I'm also honored and humbled to be presenting alongside such illustrious figures. As I've been listening to the conference yesterday and today, it struck me that there seems to be a bit of a confusion as to the process that is being used to resolve this dispute in terms of negotiation. Is it a rights-based process, which would mean using international law and applying that international law, or is it an interest-based negotiation process, which is a very, very different process? These are two very different processes, and you need to decide as to which process to use when it comes to a diplomatic solution. Law is based on the application of principles, doctrines, and precedents, whereas negotiation is not based on claims or assertions, but is based on exploring needs and looking for innovative and creative solutions that could possibly resolve the conflicting needs of the parties. I'm not sure that a process of negotiation, a true process of negotiation, which really looks carefully at the interests of the parties and tries to seek innovative solutions to conflicting needs, has really been attempted, which kind of gives us a bit of a glimmer of hope for possible future resolution. With regard to this question of how it affects the broader region, I think it's important to take a look at some of the obstacles that have presented themselves up until this point in reaching any resolution between the primary players and actors in this particular dispute. And before discussing any of the solutions, I think we need to be looking at the obstructions, one of which could be political. With a cloud of national elections looming for the past couple of years over Ethiopia, it's made it difficult for Ethiopia to reach any kind of solution for fear of conceding too much. And if we concede too much, the political future may be jeopardized of any leader such as Prime Minister Abiy. Even with the elections now behind us, it still will take a lot of courage to be able to actually find resolution. Another obstruction to the progress in the negotiations, which is an important one, is the perception, I think, particularly of Egypt, in that the old treaties, the 1927 treaty, the 1902 treaty, the 1959 treaty, still actually has some relevance to the dispute. In these treaties, there were certain commitments not to have any work constructed across the Blue Nile, Lake Tana, or any of the other areas, which Ethiopia and the downstream countries actually committed to. However, I think it's important that we recognize these treaties, for example, the Treaty of 1959, which allotted water rights to Egypt, but neglected to give any downriver countries. And we need to recognize that the geopolitical and other factors have changed so dramatically that those agreements are outdated. I think that if Egypt maybe will agree to abandon some of those agreements, maybe it's possible that Ethiopia would agree to work towards a binding commitment. But those agreements, I think, are in the way of any possible good faith negotiation effort. A third obstruction relates to the issue of trust. In 1927, Egypt and Ethiopia actually put together some diplomatic relations, which were actually good. But I think once Ethiopia started building the dam, and as such, did not respond to Egypt's request to stop construction and negotiate a settlement, I think that destroyed and eroded any trust and relationship. I think the riparian countries of the Nile need to change their mindset from one of the fact that the Nile is a divided segment of sovereign waterways to one of the to a mindset where the Nile is actually an ecosystem of the entire Nile basin, and its responsibilities of the riparian countries to manage that ecosystem and also to be able to sort of regulate its ebb and flow collaboratively and constructively. I think if we're going to reach any resolution over here, I think we need to recognize that any past efforts and attempts at negotiation, in fact, is obsolete, it's exhausted, it's depleted because of poor process, because of failed attempts, because of disappointing and frustrating outcomes. And I think maybe we need to reset that button on the negotiation and start again negotiating with reinvigorated and re-energized approach to a negotiation of restoring and getting back on track on this issue. We heard in the previous session that the costs of a military confrontation would be so enormous.
Sorry to interrupt you, sir.
Mr.
Raphael, you talked about negotiations, and also you talked about the different countries and the efforts that should be exerted. There is the 2015 framework agreement, and both Egypt and Sudan recognize the rights of Ethiopia. So can the dam be a source of cooperation between the different countries? How can this be successful in order to meet the interests of all parties?
Well, that's an excellent question, and I think we have to look at these negotiations in two separate phases. And I think the first part of the negotiation has to be dealing with the immediate pressing issue of filling the dam, and how that will be done and accomplished. I think that needs to be a temporary agreement, not in any violation of the Declaration of Principles. The Declaration of Principles is a guideline and an outline. It's not specific agreements. We need to, within that framework of the 2015 Declaration of Principles, yes, we need to be able to negotiate some sort of resolution. So the first phase is only looking at the immediate pressing issue, and it will be a temporary agreement and not setting any precedent. And then the second phase needs to be a longer-term agreement, looking at a broader coalition and alliance between all the riparian countries and the countries that are impacted and affected by the Nile. And in terms of looking at an integrated agreement and a collaborative agreement, which could affect issues such as trade, it could affect issues such as industry, it could affect issues such as military cooperation, fighting terrorism, cultural exchanges, so that all countries become interdependent on one another, and it creates a coalition. But that's for the second phase of the negotiations. The first phase of the negotiations needs to be really looking at the pressing issues for an immediate, temporary, non-precedent setting agreement.
تماما.
نعم. مشاهدينا الكرام، ضيوفي الكرام،
Ladies and
السيد
gentlemen,
رافائيل سيغادرنا بعد قليل، ولذلك
Mr. Raphael is going to be leaving soon, so that is why I'm going to give him another opportunity, and after that I'm going to give the opportunity to the remaining guests. Mr. Raphael, you talked about negotiations, 7 years of negotiations, and the three parties were not able to reach a mechanism or a binding agreement, and we still only have 1 month. In your opinion, how can we reach a solution about the negotiations? احنا على الهواء.
Thank you. I think that the negotiations, as I mentioned earlier, that have been attempted up until this point has been focused on legal rights. Legal rights is a different process. That's a litigation process. That needs to be litigated by the International Court of Justice. Negotiation is a very, very different process. The negotiation needs to be a process of looking for, first of all, deeply understanding each other's concerns, spending adequate time without proposal, without solutions, really deeply understanding what the concerns of each party is. And once we can understand what those concerns are, then we want to look for innovative and creative solutions, maybe completely new ideas that meet the interests of all parties, at least to an acceptable degree. I don't believe this process of negotiation has really been attempted yet. It's been a lot of posturing and a lot of positioning, but really understanding needs and getting together and saying what innovative ideas can we come up that could meet everybody's needs and everybody's concerns to an acceptable degree. That's something where we want to take a look at and see where we can find a solution within that framework.
ربما التعليق الأخير وسريعا جدا سيد
رافائيل. Perhaps Mr. Raphael, in your opinion, what is the international power that can sponsor such kind of interest negotiation?
Well, that gets to a question of what I call the talks before the talks. Part of a successful negotiation is to, first of all, have negotiations about the negotiation. And that involves parties getting together and designing the process collaboratively, not where one party decides unilaterally. And one of those questions that need to be decided in the talks about the talks is to what degree do the parties want an outside international organization involved or not? And if so, in what capacity? And if it's in capacity, at what stage of negotiation? I think the parties need to have a discussion about what these negotiations need to look like as we move forward. And that's a very, very important part of the negotiation in terms of the parties together designing the process of negotiation. So that's really up to the parties in terms of what they can come to an agreement on, whether or not there should be an international organization involved.
Thanks ever so much, sir. You're being thanked now by the presenter. It was a pleasure having you in this segment, and we do understand that you have another commitment. It was a pleasure having you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So, distinguished guests, we're going to continue with this session. And before we start the session, I would like to welcome Dr. Isam Haji from NASA. Welcome, Dr. Isam. I would like to move to our guest in this session, Mr. Martin. Mr. Martin, how do you see that the continuation of this conflict, how do you see, to what extent do you think it can lead to an extended conflict in the Red Sea region and the Horn of Africa? Go ahead, sir.
Good evening, Qatar, and thank you indeed for your kind invitation. I have worked with Turkey, Syria, and Iraq since the mid-90s, and Turkey developed 24 dams with no agreements with the downstream countries. I believe that the Eastern Nile Basin has the potential for not only agreement, but reaching
ولكن
solutions that
بإمكانها أن
are
تصل
beneficiary
كذلك
for all
حلول تكون
countries.
مفيدة
I
بالنسبة
would like to
لكل
focus
الدول، وهنا
on
أريد أن أركز
possible solutions
على
and not problems,
بعض
if you allow
الحلول
me, sir.
المحتملة وليس المشاكل إن سمحت
The
لي.
basics of this is that
الأساس في
all
هذه
parties
المقاربة
are
هو أن
hesitant to
كل
accept
الأطراف
any
هي
suggestions
مترددة في قبول
which
أي
could be viewed
اقتراح
as a
بإمكانه أن ينظر
substitute
إليه
for loss
على
of their rightful
أنه
share.
بديل على خسارة
However, a
حقهم
filling
في
agreement with
الحصة
Ethiopia will
المالية.
not
إن
resolve the immense water
الوضع
resources
الموجود
challenges
لن
of
يتمكن
Egypt
من حل التحديات
and
المتعلقة
Sudan.
بمصر والسودان.
And I think what we have seen
وأعتقد
so
أن ما
far in
رأيناه
these
حتى الآن
web seminars
في
is that
هذه
when
الندوات هو
parties
إن
only
عندما يكون
discuss
هناك
principles,
أطراف تتناقش
there
على
are few
المبادئ،
solutions
هناك
in
بعض
the realm of
الحلول
political
في
drama.
المجال السياسي أو الدراما
If the
السياسية.
three countries
إذا ما
deal with the
قامت الدول
major water
الثلاثة
resource
بالتعامل مع
challenges,
التحديات المتعلقة
there
بالموارد
are solutions.
المائية، فحينها يكون هناك
So what?
حلول. ماذا إذن؟
I will emphasize
أريد أن
two
أؤكد على
initiatives which potentially
مبادرتين
could resolve this.
وكذلك ربما احتمالية وجود كذلك
All
مبادرة
parties are
أخرى.
concerned
كل
about the future
الأطراف
of the
هي
water resources
قلقة
situation.
بشأن الوضع المتعلق بمستقبل
Uncertainty should
الموارد
be reduced.
المياه. هناك الكثير من
Predictability must be
الغموض،
assured.
لابد أن يكون هناك طمأنة
And I
بالنسبة
suggest
للتوقعات.
that a
وهنا أقترح
major
أن يكون
water resources
هناك
trust fund is
صندوق
established for
لهذه
the three
الموارد يتم
countries.
تأسيسه بالنسبة للدول الثلاث،
And the international community
والمجتمع
should pay for
الدولي
this.
لابد أن تدفع نظير هذا الصندوق.
There are many trust
هناك
funds that could be
الكثير
used
من
like
الصناديق
models.
التي يمكن أن تستخدم
But I
كنماذج
have to
يحتذى
admit
بها،
that
لكن
what
لابد
comes to
أن
my
أقر
mind
أن ما
is
يتبادر
that
إلى ذهني
the
الآن
ruins of
هي
Europe
أن
after the
أنقاض
Second
اليورو
World
بعد
War,
الحرب العالمية
the
الثانية،
American established what is called a Marshall
وأمريكا
Fund.
قامت بتأسيس ما يسمى
So why
بصندوق
not
مارشال.
establish
فلماذا
equivalent
لا
fund
نقوم بتأسيس
for
صندوق
Egypt,
مشابه بالنسبة
Sudan, and
لمصر
Ethiopia,
والسودان
but
وإثيوبيا،
with different
ولكن من
specificities?
خلال خصوصيات
A
محددة
massive
ومختلفة.
international funding
أن
to Egypt
يكون هناك تمويل
should be
كبير
established
بالنسبة لمصر حتى
to
يتم
enhance the
تأسيس هذا
water management,
الصندوق لتعزيز إدارة
more
الموارد
efficient
المالية،
water
وأن
irrigation
يكون
techniques,
هناك تقنيات
transformation of
الري
water
أكثر
demanding crops,
فعالة،
water
وكذلك
desalination,
تعزيز
etc.
عملية تحلية المياه وما إلى ذلك من
And
التقنيات
the
الأخرى.
international community should
والمجتمع
contribute.
الدولي لابد أن يساهم في هذا الإطار.
It should also contribute to the
لابد
cost for
أن
Ethiopia in reaching
يساهم
an agreement
فيما
of
يخص
fulfilling,
إثيوبيا لتصل إلى
and these
اتفاق،
criteria, of course,
وهذه
have to be
المعايير
negotiated.
حول كيفية
The third
المعايير التي لابد أن تعتمد
component should
بالنسبة
include
لكيفية
Sudan,
التفاوض. إذن العنصر الثالث لابد أن
improving the
يتضمن
water
السودان،
efficiency,
بما في ذلك
irrigation, and
تعزيز
possible
النجاعة في
so-called
عملية
SWOT.
الري، وكذلك استخدام ما يسمى
The
بالسوات.
second concept,
المفهوم
it's
الثاني
about establishing
يتعلق
an assurance system.
بنظام طمأنة لابد أن يتم
All parties
تأسيسه.
are
كل
concerned about the
الأطراف
compliance of an
قلقة
agreement.
حيال الالتزام والامتثال بالاتفاقات
Look
الموجودة.
at the
انظروا
war in the Balkans a few
الحرب،
years back.
حرب البلقان التي جرت قبل سنوات.
When an agreement was put in
عندما
place,
يكون هناك اتفاق
they established a
يتم
verification
تأسيس
compliance procedure
نظام
for
أو
all the
إجراء
parties to follow.
التحقق والامتثال
And this is
لتمتثل كل
exactly what
الأطراف،
should be
وهذا
done
بالضبط
in
ما
this
لابد أن
context as
يتم
well.
في هذا السياق كذلك.
Because without
لماذا؟
this assurance
دون
concerned
ما
parties
هذه الطمأنة، طمأنة الأطراف
and
المعنية المختلفة،
suspicions
نعم.
وفي
develop,
ضوء الشكوك الموجودة
and
في
in
هذا
order to
الإطار،
facilitate
وحتى نقوم
procedure for mutual
بتيسير
visits and
الإجراءات
exchange of information
لتبادل المعلومات بين الأطراف
be
المعنية،
established.
فإن
Complete
هذا الأمر
transparency,
سيكون صعبا. إذن هناك حاجة
maximum
لشفافية
efficiency,
كاملة ونجاعة
and
بحدها
accountability.
الأقصى، وكذلك لابد أن تكون هناك مساءلة.
These are the
هذه
major initiatives
هي المبادرات
we
الأساسية
should have done
التي يجدر بنا
in the
أن
sense
نقوم
of the
بها.
international
كان يجدر بنا
community
أن نقوم
to
بها
have
نحن
on
كمجتمع
Euphrates and
دولي،
Isla with Euphrates and Tigris.
كما هو الشأن
We
بالنسبة
failed.
لدجلة والفرات عندما
Artists were
فشلنا
left with their own. And what did this
والأطراف
give
تركت
Iran?
لحالها.
nothing.
وانظروا ما الذي حدث بالنسبة للعراق، لا
They
شيء.
are major water resources
إذن
challenges.
هناك تحديات كبيرة تتعلق
And
بالموارد
that
المائية
actually,
عفوا،
that situation dealing
وهذا
with Iraqi government has
الوضع
prompted me
الذي
to say, let
يتعلق
us
بالعراق
establish a Marshall
جعلني
Fund
أفكر بأن يكون
for the
هناك
three
هذا الصندوق
countries.
بالنسبة للثلاث دول
First focus on
الثلاث.
Egypt,
أولا التركيز على
then the
مصر
two
وبعد
others.
ذلك على الدولتين
There are
الأخرتين.
many other speakers,
هناك
so I leave it so
الكثير
far.
من
Thank you,
المبادرات الأخرى التي
Mr.
سأتركها
Speaker.
لاحقا. شكرا جزيلا.
نعم أرجو أن تبقى معي السيد مارتن.
So please stay with us, Mr. Martin. So we'd like to move to Mr. Davison. So the question is coming to you, sir.
هل يمكن أن يؤدي استمرار النزاع على سد
The
النهضة إلى
conflict
اضطراب في
that is
منطقة
taking
شرق
place, can it
إفريقيا
lead to
والبحر
more
الأحمر؟
the
وإذا
instability in
كيف
the Horn
سيؤثر
of
مثل هذا الاضطراب
Africa
على الأمن
and
الدولي؟ ما هي
the
التأثيرات؟
Red Sea? How would it impact international security in your view? If you can kindly go slowly, please.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
شكرا للدعوة.
So, I mean, obviously, the hope
من
here,
الواضح
with the Renaissance
أن
Dam
الأمل هنا
is
عندما
that
يتعلق
as
الأمر
a
بسد
project
النهضة،
which is designed as a regional
وهو
project,
مشروع تم تصميمه على أنه
it can
مشروع
actually bring
إقليمي
countries closer together.
الذي بإمكانه أن
It can
يجلب
foster
الدول لتكون
economic integration,
مجتمعة مع بعضها البعض في تكامل
and it can do
اقتصادي مع
that
بعضها البعض،
the export of electricity.
وبإمكانها أن تحقق ذلك من خلال تصدير الطاقة
It can do that
الكهربائية،
by
ومن
facilitating
خلال كذلك
greater
تسهيل
irrigation in
وتيسير
Sudan,
نظم
which
ري
could in
كبيرة
turn
في
to
السودان،
catalyze joint
والتي بإمكانها أن
agricultural
تحفز
investment projects.
استثمارات مشتركة ما بين هذه الدول.
So there is still that hope, and I
إذن
think
لا يزال
my
هناك
idea of
هذا
this
الأمل،
session of your conference is to start
والفكرة
focusing
وراء
on
هذا
how the
الأمر هو
Renaissance Dam can be a
التركيز
source of
على
cooperation
سد النهضة
rather than
كوسيلة
conflict.
للتعاون أكثر منها كوسيلة ربما
Of course, what
للنزاع
needs to
قد يحدث.
happen
ما
there
يحتاج
is
أن
we
يحدث
need to get over
حقيقة
these
هو
sort of
أننا نحتاج
initial stumbling blocks
أن نتجاوز هذه
in the project, a
العوائق
project which is
الموجودة
not
في
even
هذا المشروع،
complete
هذا
yet.
المشروع الذي حتى لم ينتهي حتى
And
الآن.
the arguments are going about
والمحاججات المستخدمة حاليا هي تتعلق
the length of the filling period and
بفترة
surrounding operating period.
الملء
So rather than focusing on
وغيرها. إذن
the
بدلا من
elements of the
التركيز على
project
هذه
which could
العناصر
bring
المتعلقة
mutual benefit,
بالمشروع التي ربما
such
قد
as
تؤدي
the
إلى
construction of transmission
مشتركات مثل
lines and
بناء
accompanying power
خطوط
deals or
نقل
construction
الطاقة
investment projects,
الكهربائية وما إلى ذلك من المشروع
and
الأخرى،
all the benefits that come from cooperation.
ربما
The
بإمكاننا
parties
أن
are
نركز
stuck
على
on
التعاون ما بين هذه
trying to agree
الأطراف
the
حتى
terms
يتسنى
of the
لهذه
project, the
الأطراف أن
guidelines
تصل
for
إلى توافق
And
حول
I think
شروط
the starkest
اتفاق
indication of
ما.
this problem is the Sudan-Ethiopia
إذن هذه
relationship.
المشكلة التي
As you
أثرت على
know,
علاقات
initially
إثيوبيا
Sudan was generally supportive
وتأثيرات
of the
ذلك
project,
على العلاقات
and although
السودان وما إلى
there
ذلك.
were always reasons for concern,
إذن هناك
essentially
دائما
the
مباعث قلق فيما
Renaissance
يتعلق
Dam
هذا
can
الجانب،
benefit
لأن
from its electricity exports,
حقيقة بإمكان
reduce
سد
flooding,
النهضة
increased
أن
irrigation potential.
يؤدي إلى عديد من
But that is only
المشاكل
the case
ربما،
if Ethiopia and Sudan come to some sort of agreement about
لكن
the
لابد أن
project.
يكون هناك اتفاق
And so we're at
بشأن
that
ذلك من قبل السودان
unfortunate situation
كذلك.
where as the project reaches completion
عندما
and there is
ينتهي
still no agreement
هذا
between Sudan
المشروع
and Ethiopia,
ولا
then
يكون هناك
Sudan's
أي
concern
اتفاق
for
بهذا
the project
الشأن،
increase,
فإن
and any idea you benefit or Sudanese benefit from the project recedes. This is the challenge
إذن هذا هو
to get
التحدي
beyond
الذي
this
نواجهه
idea
هنا، هو
that
تخطي
the
هذه
Renaissance Dam
الفكرة
is simply a
التي أن
risk or
سد
is simply
النهضة
a source
يشكل
of
فقط مصدر
potential conflict and
نزاع
tension,
محتمل
and to
وتوتر
shift
محتمل.
the tone and the entire
إذن
atmosphere
عندما
around the
يتغير أو
negotiations
تتغير
and
النبرة
the project
فإن
into one where people focus on how to
التفاوض
cooperate in order
ككل
to bring the
سيتغير،
benefits of the
وبالتالي
project.
سيكون هناك تركيز على كيفية
To get
الاستفادة
back to
من هذه المشاريع.
the
إذن
crux of your question,
بالعودة إلى
again,
صلب
if we look at the
السؤال الذي طرحته،
Sudan-Ethiopia
عندما
relationship,
ننظر إلى علاقات
what
السودان
was fairly
وإثيوبيا،
steady bilateral relation
إذن كانت علاقات ثنائية
has deteriorated quite rapidly,
مستقرة،
both in
لكنها
terms of the failure to agree on the Renaissance Dam and
تضررت
increasing
بشكل كبير
Sudanese
جدا،
alignment with the
وتدهورت
Egyptian position, let's
بسبب
say, but also now
اتساق
in
الموقف
terms of
السوداني
a
والمصري،
flare-up of the territorial
وأدى إلى
disputes between Ethiopia and
زيادة
Sudan.
النزاعات
Again, it's something which the
ما
parties
بين
have managed
كل من
fairly
إثيوبيا
adequately
والسودان،
without too much drama for
وكان
many
هناك
and
الكثير من
decades.
الدراما ولعقود من الزمن حول
Now there is
الكثير من
no
القضايا.
obvious national interest for either country
ليس هناك
in
أي
allowing this
مصلحة
deterioration
وطنية
relations
في أي من الدول
to
لتسمح بهذا
get out
التدهور
of control.
ليصل إلى
And
مرحلة
indeed,
يخرج فيها عن
given the
السيطرة.
political fragilities
عندما
in
نأخذ
both Egypt
بالاعتبار
and Sudan,
الوضع
there are huge
السياسي
incentives
المحترق في كلا البلدين،
for the leaders in
هناك
those two
الكثير من
countries to
الحوافز
not
والدوافع بالنسبة
allow
لقادة الدول حتى لا
relations to
يسمحوا
get out.
بجعل العلاقة تخرج عن
But
السيطرة.
we are where we are, and we must.
Sorry to interrupt you.
نعم أرجو أن تبقى معي سيد
So
ويليام.
please stay with us,
أذهب إلى
Mr.
دكتور
William.
عصام
I
حجي،
would like
عالم
to go
الفضاء
to
المصري بوكالة
Dr.
ناسا الأمريكية.
عصام حجي
دكتور عصام،
from
يعني
NASA.
كانت لك دراسة
Dr.
يعني منذ
Isam,
أيام
you had
تحدثت
a
فيها عن
study a few
يعني
years
وجهة
ago where
نظرك
you
من
talked about
خلال
your opinion
بحث دولي.
through an
أرجو أن تطلعنا على
international
هذا
study.
البحث
Can you
قبل
give
أن
us
نذهب
an
إلى
idea about
الأسئلة
this
التالية
study before we
حول
move to
سد
the
النهضة،
other
وهل من
questions
الممكن أن
about
يكون
the
مشروع للتعاون بين الدول الثلاث
Renaissance
في
Dam?
إطار
Can it be
مبدأ
a project of
الكل كسبان
cooperation
أو
where
مبدأ win-win؟
on the win-win on a win-win basis?
الدراسة اللي عملناها
So the study
كانت
that we have prepared
إلى حساب العجز في الموازنة المائية
aims
لمصر
at calculating the deficit of the water budget of Egypt at the time of the filling that has happened in Al Nahda Dam. So this was a study that aimed to look at the deficit as a result of the filling of the Renaissance Dam. So the study is in front of me here. So we have had a statistical study for all the scenarios, and we have looked at the deficit that has resulted from that.
Can I still listen? Can I still listen in? Thank you.
So this was the result of the filling in the last 3 years, and after we have carried out these
المنشورة والمحكمة، فهي ليست رأي وليست
Yes, I would like to, if possible.
أخذنا فقط في الاعتبار الأرقام المنشورة
So the figures, these have been peer-reviewed and have been announced officially. And when we look at those figures, we have realized the following. So the deficit, the water deficit, the average of it as a result of the Renaissance Dam is approximately 16 billion cubic meters, between 16 to 17 billion cubic meters. So this deficit is as a result of the increase of population, and this deficit is between 17 million to 18 million. So the water deficit in Egypt as a result of building the Renaissance Dam
في الحجم عدد العجز المائي نتيجة عدد زيادة السكان.
due to the increase in the population. And after that, we have had a study of the proposed solutions, and also we have looked into the effectiveness of these solutions depending on how easy they are to implement, and also the funding and the timeline and so on. And we have found that we can deal with this deficit through the use of the high dam and underground water and the development of irrigation systems, agricultural systems. But these solutions are very important indeed, but many of the solutions that have been talked about in media, such as desalination and so on, but these are not the solution because they cannot fill this deficit in the timeline available. So what we have done for us to clarify to people the importance of having an agreement.
العجز الكامل في الموازنة المائية اللي هو متوسط 31 مليار متر مكعب في العام، حولنا هذا الرقم إلى وقعه على الاقتصاد المصري في حالة عدم معالجة هذا العجز. وهذه الحالة طبعا يتم معالجة جزء من هذا العجز بتدوير المياه وغيره. ولكن احنا حابين نوري حجم هذا العجز على الميزانية الاقتصاد المصري، فقلنا انه في حالة عدم معالجة هذا العجز انه يستطيع ان يتسبب
If it is not
هذا
solved,
31 مليار متر مكعب في تدهور أكثر من 72 ما يصل إلى 72% من الرقعة الزراعية، وما يعادل خسائر في القطاع الزراعي على عدد سنوات الملء اللي هي ال3 سنوات ب 51 مليار دولار وخفض في الناتج القومي للشخص بنسبة 8%، أي أن متوسط دخل الفرد ينزل من $2,900 في السنة إلى $2,600 في السنة. الهدف من وضع هذه الأرقام أمام المواطن وأمام القارئ وأمام متخذ القرار أنه يرى حجم إهمال القطاع المائي ما هو الرقم الذي يأتي من وراء ذلك. هو $51 مليار في 3 سنوات. وأنا أسأل السؤال: كم ينفق على تطوير قطاع دراسات المياه في مصر؟ كم ينفق على تطوير قطاع دراسات العلوم الصحراوية والمناخية ليس فقط في مصر بل في مصر والسودان وأثيوبيا وكل دول الأفريقية؟
water security studies. So this is just a small speck. That is why we have these issues. So studies should be carried out. And we have had only a few thousands of dollars that have been spent on climate studies, desert studies, and water security studies. You find billions of dollars that are spent in armaments, media, and so on. And these are not pressing issues as water is. So more should be spent in such studies because this is a pressing issue. So these figures, these statistics have been published, have been peer-reviewed because we do not want to see another catastrophe in Africa. So the figures and statistics have been published. I hope they are wrong. And so this is a model that was published in 2018 in a peer-reviewed magazine. So there are issues, but it comes to the figures that are published by the different countries that reflects the problem that we want to solve scientifically and not politically. Dr. Isam,
يعني ربما الأرقام تختلف
perhaps
صعودا أو
these
نزولا، لكن
figures
هناك
differ.
يعني بالأرقام
Maybe
هناك
they are
حجم
high, maybe they are
خسائر
low, but there are losses and repercussions, harm and impact on countries, and perhaps this will also benefit some other countries. How? In the framework of this session, while we're talking about joint benefits, in your view, and from these figures, how can we alleviate the level of loss through cooperation between these three countries? This is an excellent question, and we have included in the research paper that the real crisis, in my view, is not a crisis of water, it is a food crisis. So there is a deficit that makes this area that is dedicated to agriculture, makes it shrink and deteriorate. So that is why there should be cooperation between different countries. So there can be perhaps renting of agricultural lands, there can be perhaps development of agricultural lands that are going to be rented in order to strike a balance in the deficit and perhaps return those lands to Ethiopia after that. Maybe Ethiopia, as it does when it rents those territories to foreigners, so Egypt can benefit from those territories or lands that would be used in agriculture, and Ethiopia would benefit from the fact that these lands are going to be developed and so on.
تكون الإجابة بالتأكيد لا.
So this should not be the problem. It is not the problem because it should be better to save water in areas where there are average levels of evaporation rather than do that in the valley of Nasser. So it's better to do that in that particular area. So as a person who looks at the matter from an environmental perspective, because these small dams would limit the losses, but the problem lies in the fact that there is no agreement between these countries, and the fact that there are some voices that see the problem as a national problem or a patriotic problem.
كباحث علمي أنا أقف في صف المحافظة على نهر النيل اللي هو أساس شريان الحياة لأثيوبيا والسودان ومصر.
River, which is a source of life to the three countries and not one country. So you talked about something new, talking about this matter. We're talking about scientific solutions and reasonable solutions when it comes to partnership. And you said the dam is not the problem, and that is why there should be an agreement between the three countries, an agreement over cooperation in the light of not having an agreement between the three countries. Do you expect that there are going to be environmental impacts on Ethiopia, Egypt, and Sudan? This is what we reached in this research. In case there are no solutions, no cooperation, these are going to be the impacts, the repercussions. That is why officials should know the level of impacts and destruction that might happen as a result of not reaching an agreement. And I would like to clarify.
لا يمكن تضع على نهر النيل سدود بهذه الحجم بدون وجود خسائر. يعني السد العالي تسبب في خسائر لبيئة نهر النيل، يعني تسبب بتآكل الدلتا الموجودة في مصر.
As it was the case with the high dam in Egypt itself. So we cannot say Ethiopia is wrong and Egypt is right. No, we say that big dams, they lead to losses, and there are going to be losses if we have such big dams. That is why we have to discuss joint management of these dams in order to preserve the Nile, not to make one country victorious over the other. As an Egyptian citizen, I think that Egypt and Ethiopia are not in conflict with each other. No, they are in conflict with hunger, thirst, ignorance, and so on. So this is a very important point. If you can stay with us, Dr. John Martin. So you have 3 minutes. Mr. Martin, you have heard our guest talk about this conflict. So this is not a conflict over water, but it is against ignorance, against ignorance, hunger, and thirst. So what is the roadmap that should be followed to have a win-win situation for all countries in order to put an end to this conflict over the Renaissance Dam? Go ahead, if you can kindly go slowly, please.
I would like to commend the expert from NASA. He's removing the veil, the political drama about the matter, and talks about possible technical substantial solution. The only way forward is that. But based on my experience dealing with countries with similar disputes, is that you have to bring something new into the equation so they are able to discuss subjects, solutions, like the gentleman from NASA proposed. And the question is, how do you do that? How do you get them around the table and discuss how do we cooperate for the benefit of everybody? The solutions are there, but the political willingness are so far not there. And what I've suggested is to create a huge fund which will stimulate and drag the 3 countries into a situation where these solutions can be resolved. If no result, Ethiopia will develop the dams, Egypt will be in the same state, and that is a lose-lose situation. Well, good for Ethiopia, but for cooperation and lack of funding.
Sorry to interrupt you. You mentioned a fund. So I would like to talk about the sensitivity of the word fund when it comes to water conflicts. Some would think that a fund means paying water in exchange of water. What do you mean by a fund? If you can explain to our audience, please.
Thank you for allowing me
شكرا
to
جزيلا
clarify
لإعطاء
that.
الفرصة
This is
لتوضيح
not
هذه
about
النقطة.
paying for the
المسألة
water.
لا تتعلق في دفع أموال
This
مقابل
is
المياه.
about a
لا،
development
المسألة
fund
تتعلق
of water
بصندوق
resources
تنمية للموارد
because there
المائية
is
عفوا.
huge
لأن
investment
هناك
only for a
استثمارات
part of
كبيرة
Cairo
لكن
to
فقط
develop
لجزء من
a
القاهرة
water
ليكون
sewage treatment
هناك
plant. It's
ليكون
millions
هناك
of
تطوير
dollars.
لمنشآت
How are
الصرف
you
الصحي
going to invest in the
بملايين
country with
الدولارات.
over
كيف بإمكانك
Egypt,
أن
over 100
تستثمر في
million
دولة
people? You need
بها أكثر
billions.
من
And where
مئات
can you
مليون؟
find
تحتاج
that?
إلى مليارات. وأين
I know
عساك
that
أن
the
تجد
EU
هذه
has
الأموال؟
discussed the matter.
أعلم أن الاتحاد الأوروبي
I'm
قد
sure the
ناقش هذا
Americans
الأمر.
would
أنا
be
متأكد أن
interested.
الأمريكيين سيكونون
China,
مهتمين.
Gulf
الصين
states,
كذلك، دول الخليج
here is
كذلك.
the solution.
هنا
But
يكمن
we
الحل.
have to give them
لكن
something
لابد
so
أن
they will
نعطيهم
move
شيئا
towards
حتى ينتقلوا
the negotiating
باتجاه
table,
عملية
not discussing
التفاوض
my
وليس
principle, your
مناقشة
principle,
مبدئي
and
في
then
مقابل
we
مبدئك
continue as what we have done for the
ومواصلة
last 3
المسار
years.
الذي بدأنا به منذ 3 سنوات.
نعم، أرجو أن تبقى معي.
Please stay with us,
سيد
sir.
جون مارتن. أنقل الكلام
I
إلى
would
ويليام
like to
ديفيسون،
move to
مدير برنامج
Mr.
القرن الأفريقي
Davison.
ومجموعة الأزمات الدولية. سيد ديفيسون،
Mr.
الآن الحديث
Davison,
حول
now
يعني
talks
عدم
are
وجود إرادة
about
سياسية
the lack of a
للذهاب إلى
political
مشروع
will
لمواجهة
in
الفقر
order to
والجهل والمرض
confront
يضم الدول الثلاث.
illnesses,
وأيضا الحديث حول
hunger
السيد
and
مارتن حول
thirst,
أهمية
and
وجود
what
صندوق
Mr.
لمعالجة
Martin talked
مشاكل
about, the
المياه في
importance
الأدوار
of
الثلاث.
having a fund.
هنا
So
الحديث
here,
حول
I would like to
هل من
ask you,
الممكن أن الوصول
is it
لاتفاق
possible to
تعاون
reach
في ظل
an
عدم وجود
agreement
إرادة
of
سياسية
cooperation in
بين
the
الدول الثلاث من أجل
light of
التعاون
an absence of a
والذهاب
political will
خطوة للأمام؟
in order to move forward? If you can kindly go slowly, please.
I mean, I think no. I think it's evident that to reach an agreement, we need to have the political will there. And without straying into the territory of these experts, I mean, of course, positive incentives need to be offered, or could be offered, which would improve the situation in terms of some form of development fund. This needs to be a comprehensive solution to the issues of water scarcity and water saving across the basin. But throughout this process, the problem has not been the absence of technical solutions. It has been this question of political will. And in my previous answer, what I was trying to say is that we have got into this zero-sum situation. But as soon as the tables are turned, and the political will was there, and the compromises were made to reach an agreement, then that's where we could see the benefits of cooperation. And that's where this idea of sort of positive incentives could certainly be introduced. I just think that at the stage there's so much focus, whether it's from the governments, whether it's from the media, and then amongst the general public in the different countries, there's so much focus on the negative aspects of the situation, the supposedly unreasonable, uncooperative, or unilateral behavior of the other party. There's so much focus on the national interests that it is to the detriment of the whole process of reaching an agreement and encouraging the politicians and leaders to alter their attitude so that we have something that can be described as the political will for agreement. I think having witnessed this process for about a decade now, it's obvious that at all times there have been mistakes from all parties. There have been stances that have been adopted which could have been softer. But there is still a path to compromise here, where all of the more sort of positive, cooperative way of approaching this can come to the fore. And I think if we look at something like the filling period, the general format for how Ethiopia fills this dam has fundamentally been agreed for a few years now. There are the initial 2 years supposed to be for turbine testing, any plans to implement
ترتيبات تم اعتمادها في هذا الإطار. تقطع الصوت، نعتذر للسادة المستمعين للترجمة.
أرجو أن تبقى معي السيد ويليام، يعني ربما هناك مشكلة في الصوت. أرجو أن تبقى
Sorry to interrupt you because there is a problem with the connection. We're going to move now to Mr. عصام حجي, Dr. عصام حجي. Dr. Isam, talking about the losses and the environmental impact of the Renaissance Dam. So Ethiopia says that it doesn't impact Egypt and Sudan, and Egypt suffers from water scarcity. And so the average for each individual in Egypt is much lower than the average of the world population gets. So there are so many losses, impacts due to the fact that there is no cooperation. So therefore there should be cooperation due to the damage that might happen. So there are so many risks, and we were able to accumulate figures. We accumulated all the figures that were published in this research with regard to the evaporation of water, and these are half the amount of evaporation that happens in the high dam, or the leakage of water in other areas. And the average is 2 billion cubic meter per year. So these numbers and figures, yes, they exist. And as I have indicated, the problem lies in this battle of figures. So we would like to have figures that reflect reality, and would like to know the standards, the maximum for these dams in keeping with the other systems, and how can we preserve the Nile River as a system and not talk about this dam or that. So at the end of the day, the part that benefits or that loses, it is the same people, the people who live on the river's basin. So that is why I call for a scientific conference that would study the Nile River. So perhaps we should have a conference every 2 years that would look into the water developments, and also to end up with recommendations about the deterioration of these resources, and also geological developments that exist. Without these figures, we're going to face difficulties. We're going to stay where we are. And once again, how much is it spent on these talks, and how much is spent on research that is presented? So there are millions that are spent on these talks, and the specs are spent on research. That is why we cannot solve a problem if we do not know the scientific dimensions of this problem. Dr. Hissam, please stay with us, because you have mentioned, and what our guests have mentioned is very important indeed. So that is why Mr. Raphael has come back to us again, and I would like to pose the question to him. So in the light of what Martin had said, yes, there are bad experiences where countries have not reached an agreement, and also there were talks about a lack of a political will, and also a need for positive incentives and a fund between the three countries in order to solve these water issues. So how can we reach a binding and satisfactory agreement
the person
between
whom you're trying to reach is currently unavailable. Please leave a message.
Yes, certainly.
نعم بالتأكيد.
Again, my focus has been today more in terms of the process of negotiation rather than in terms of the solutions. And I think there have been some wonderful solutions suggested by previous speakers.
The person whom you're trying to
all mentioned very, very good ideas, both for the short term and for the long term. In terms of the process of negotiation, many people come into a negotiation with the answers already decided. And we've seen some of that in these negotiations negotiations too. And I think in a negotiation, if they come into that negotiation with open minds and say, these are the needs, these are the problems, these are the concerns, let's together, jointly, as a collaborative group, brainstorm ideas. Let's throw out all sorts of possible ideas and then refine those ideas and develop them in order to sort of work towards a framework agreement. But it's very, very difficult, I think, to come into a situation between Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt and say, here are your solutions. I think what's important over here is to focus on a process for the negotiations and then allow the negotiations to develop and evolve.
Too many
solutions.
I've been cut off twice. I've spent all of the time listening to people. I can't hear myself speaking.
يعني البعض يتحدث عن أنه التفاوض فشل وبالتالي لم يبقى إلا شهر
I don't know if I have a bad connection, but both times I spoke, I was cut off. One time I was speaking, I could hear an echo on the other side of the line. It's not very, I'm not getting anything from it.
That was to you, sir. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? My sound was not good.
Sorry?
How can we save this negotiation? How can we save it?
And so that was the point that I tried to make earlier, and that is the current negotiations as they stand are contaminated, depleted, and exhausted. The process has not been good. The outcomes have not been good. There's been political posturing, and I think what we need to say is, look, a military option is not good for anybody. We need to reset the battle and start negotiations from afresh with a new process, with a new direction and with a fresh energy and reinvigoration, and move towards sit down and start talking things through from the beginning as though this is the first time we meet. I think a fresh approach and a new approach to the new process may allow these negotiations to revitalize.
So please stay with us. We're going to move to Mr. Martin, talking about the experiences that you mentioned and dams in the region. And here, Mr. Martin, how is it possible to build on these experiences in order to move to an agreement that would deal or lead to an interest or benefit to all parties?
Thank you. Excellent question.
شكرا جزيلا. سؤال ممتاز. جواب صعب.
What I would emphasize is that the responsible negotiators should be mandated by the national leaders. Politicians and others should refrain from inflammatory statements. They should not carry fuel or gasoline to the fire. That only makes it more difficult for any negotiator, any leadership. So each nation also has a responsibility to reduce the tension which is created internally into each nation. And with that attitude, with the help from external actors, I am pretty confident that there are possible solutions and they will be reached. But we need to reduce the rhetoric in order to move forward.
أن يتم تهدئته حتى نتمكن من المضي قدما.
نعم، أرجو أن تبقى معي السيد
stay with us.
دافيسون، مدير برنامج القرن الأفريقي مجموعة الأزمات الدولية، وهنا يعني الحديث حول المنفعة المتبادلة للدول.
Mr. Davison, we're talking about the joint interests of all these three countries in the light of these circumstances.
Sorry, could you repeat the question, please?
سيدي، كيف يمكن تحقيق
How
المنفعة
can we achieve joint interests in the light of the current circumstances with regard to the Renaissance Dam? Go ahead, sir.
Well, the three countries need to focus on the potential mutual benefits of the project. The Renaissance Dam is a relatively, potentially a relatively cheap producer of electricity. Therefore,
غير مكلف بالنسبة للطاقة الكهربائية، وإثيوبيا بإمكانها أن تستفيد بهذه الطاقة الكهربائية، ونفس الشيء بالنسبة للسودان ومصر بإمكانهما كذلك الاستفادة من هذه الطاقة الكهربائية الرخيصة. وكما أشرت في المداخلة السابقة، سد النهضة بإمكانه أن يخفف من مستوى الفيضانات في دول المصب، وكذلك تعزيز عملية الري في السودان. إذن استخدام المياه في السودان بإمكانه أن يزيد عملية الري، لابد أن ينظر إليه على أنه خسارة بالنسبة لمصر. إذن بإمكاننا ننظر إلى هذا المشروع لأنه مشروع إقليمي. عندما نظرنا إلى إنتاج الغذاء بشكل فعال، حينها مصر لن تحتاج أن تخسر في هذه الحالة. بإمكاننا نعزز الري في السودان. نعلم أن هناك الكثير من الري الذي يعتمد في مصر وليس بالضرورة بالنسبة لمواد إنتاج أساسية، وإنما بالنسبة لمحاصيل السكر والقطن. وبالتالي هناك سبل من خلالها بإمكان الاقتصاد السياسي أن يستفيد منها حتى تتم إعادة هيكلته. عندما ننظر إلى هذه المسألة وحيث يتمكن الأطراف الثلاثة الاستفادة من هذا الأمر. كما قلنا إننا في مرحلة يركز فيها الجميع على سلبيات المشروع، على مخاطر المشروع، لكن لابد أن نصل إلى مرحلة يكون فيها ما يكفي من الثقة ليتم الاتفاق على الجوانب الأساسية لهذا المشروع. عندما نصل إلى هذه المرحلة، حينها بإمكاننا أن نبدأ بالنظر إلى السبل المختلفة التي بإمكان من خلالها الأطراف أن يتعاونوا، سواء عندما يتعلق
whether it's on water saving measures. There are various ways that they can cooperate and see mutual benefits from the
حتى يكون هناك مزايا واستفادة مشتركة من هذا المشروع.
نعم، أرجو أن تبقى معي سيد
ديفيدسون. Please stay with us. I'm going to move to Dr. عصام. Please stay.
دكتور عصام، يعني سؤالي مرتبط بما قاله السيد ديفيدسون عندما تحدث يعني ويقول، وهناك من يقول ذلك، إنه مصر تزرع يعني محاصيل يعني تستهلك كمية كبيرة من المياه. هو تحدث عن يعني السكر.
So there were talks about crops, about sugar, about cotton, and some see that Egypt has underground water, but some say that Egypt does not only need 55 billion, it needs between 70 to 80 billion cubic meters, 88 billion cubic meters.
أو حتى الغنى المائي، يعني حسبما تحدث الآخرون حول المياه في مصر.
ده صحيح من خلال البحث، وأنا هنا طبعا عايز أوضح أنه أمثل الفريق البحثي اللي موجود في البحث لجامعة كاليفورنيا وكورنيل. فإحنا مشكلة العجز المائي الداخلي كما حضرتك أوضحت، مصر تحتاج لأكثر من حصتها في نهر النيل نتيجة زيادة معدلات استهلاك المياه. فإحنا إذا أردنا أن يكون هناك في حل لمشكلة المياه في حوض نهر النيل، ليس فقط هي مشكلة جزئية.
We wanted to have a solution not only in the Nile River, not only what these countries have.
نريد هذا الرقم من أثيوبيا، نريد هذا من السودان، نريد هذا لمصر.
We focus only on what we need, but not what the other countries need. There should be a policy for a shared benefit. There should be a policy also for population increase. We cannot have the same population increase in Egypt and Ethiopia and Sudan at the same level, and not to expect that there was a water problem. So there should be a vision for the population problem, a shared vision by the three countries, even in the spending in agriculture or irrigation, and also shared agriculture policies in the three countries. I have explained if Egypt and Sudan and Ethiopia were one country, they wouldn't have a problem at all. That is, dam wouldn't have been a problem, but these are three countries, separate countries with three different needs, with the three different policies. So the consensus or the agreement is the solution. I would like to add one more point, is the failure of reaching an agreement from my point of view is a bad reputation, not only for the three countries, however for the African continent. We would like, give this image that Africa is incapable of reaching solution to the African problem or continent. So this is a failure for the African continent, something we do not want to see. I would like to summarize by saying there should be an agreement on the agriculture, population, education, and economical policies of the three countries, so those water is used rationally and not wasted, and also being distributed fairly. Our guest, before we go to the social media and the response and participation of our audience on the audience, but before that, Dr. Isam emphasized the importance of science and the exploitation of science, and he said that is a failure and a mockery for Africa. And also what our guest talk about the political will and also stepping away from this narrow benefits or vision. We need to have a fund, a development fund, and a serious negotiation. Now we go to the social media segment and we read some of the comments from our followers on Twitter and Facebook, and then we give the chance for our guests to comment on that. The question we posed for our followers in this last session, could the Renaissance Dam become a project of cooperation between Ethiopia, Egypt and Sudan from the all winners prospect and no loser? We start with Salah Al-Fifi, who tweeted on Twitter that Israel is a main player and they believe their rights of the water from the Nile to the ocean. Muhammad Kamal says that helping Ethiopia to build their dam is a solution. Ghazi Ghazal said that Ethiopia have imposed itself and they are doing, they talk little but they achieve much, but other regimes talk a lot and achieve nothing. On Facebook, someone say after the completion of the dam, the water will be sold to Egypt and Sudan and Israel will have a cut. Another contribution, Abd al-Tawab Barakat, that the efforts to convince Ethiopia to sign an agreement, a binding agreement with Egypt is a hard task, and also he talks about the principles agreement in 2015 that will add to the gain of Israel from Camp David agreement, and he says that is an existential problem. 1 minute comment from each guest about the contribution. We go to Mr. Rafael Laben about the comment of our followers.
Which comment specifically are you referring to?
نعم يعني ما قاله ضيوفي الكرام على مواقع التواصل الاجتماعي.
Any comment you might choose, Mr. Rafael. Some talk about Israel and its role, and some say that the dam has become a reality and Ethiopia is all work and not like the others.
Yes, you know, I think there's a lot that other countries can contribute, including Israel. For example, I think maybe Israel could make contributions in terms of desalination plants. They seem to be quite advanced in desalination seawater, and they could possibly make a contribution towards that. And I think other countries downriver could make contributions in terms of agreeing to guarantees of water flow. And as far as Ethiopia is concerned, at the end of the day, I think Ethiopia is concerned about her sovereignty rights. But I think if we engaged Ethiopia appropriately together with others in this negotiation, I think they would come around. I think accomplish a lot over there. We should absolutely not give up hope.
And we go now to Mr. John Martin and talk about the comments of our followers.
Thank you. When I mentioned that we should try to remove the veil of political drama, I think that also goes to the social media. There, everyone has a responsibility to not spinning information which are not accurate. I think we have to be responsible because these issues are very important for each nation. I would also like to remind the public that there are no legal solutions to this problem. 1997 agreement, the UN Convention, gives Egypt arguments, but it also gives Ethiopia arguments. So which one should we lift up first, or second, or which one count more than others? If we participate in a legal seminar in Geneva, in the UN, well, there might be, but we're living in a real world where negotiations is the only way forward. Thank you.
شكرا جزيلا.
نعم. يعني أرجو أن تبقى معي سيد.
Please stay with us, Mr. Joe Martin. We go to Mr. William Davison. How do you comment on our followers on the social media?
Well, I'm not aware of too much Israeli involvement here. I think, as Raphael said, some of the sort of agricultural technology that Israel has become, Israeli companies have become efficient at. They just use water-saving exercises here. Maybe just to reiterate some the basic points. The filling schedule is by and large agreed. If there's dry years during the filling period, certainly some work to reach agreement on that. But overall, the GERD is a non-consumptive project. It's a hydropower project. If parties can find enough trust between them to reach agreement on some of the outstanding issues. So, for example, this issue of drought mitigation, how much water was obliged to release from its reservoir during various types of dry periods, whether during filling or opposition. Can the parties come to some compromise on that? The issue of dispute resolution. Ethiopia rejects the idea of international arbitration.
شكرا. Thank you, Mr. William. Thank you. Your time is up. Sorry for this interruption because the time is very limited. To conclude the decision, I go to Dr. Isam, and also in 1 minute how you comment on the social media. First of all, I would like to say that I am very disappointed of what I read on of what have shared on the social media that show emotional response, not rational one to this conflict. We, Egypt and Ethiopia and Sudan, are the sons of the Nile, and if we have this agreement, it's a shame on us. We need to find a solution. We need to share the resources. This is the region where we all live. Also, I would like to clarify that desalination technologies cannot solve a scarcity of 31 million square meters. They could solve a portion of this shortage, 2 to 3 billion at all, and it's very costly. So the only solution is to invest all the aid, the Americans or European, in the water field so that we could develop this sector and also rationalize the usage in Egypt. Thank you, Dr. Isam. By this, we conclude the fourth session of this conference organized by the Jazeera Studies Center and Jazeera Mubashir under the title as Nahda Renaissance Dam Between Negotiation and Military Confrontation. Over 2 years, this conference had discussed the aspects of the negotiations. We hope that we have covered this topic thoroughly. And before I thank our guests, I would like to thank my colleagues in Al Jazeera Studies and Jazeera Mubashir. And I go to my guests from Los Angeles, Mr. Rafael Bin, an expert in negotiation in African continent. Thank you, Mr. Rafael, and John Martin, the expert in also in the negotiation of the water conflict, and William Davison, also an expert in the African studies, and also from Los Angeles, Mr. Isam Haji, the Egyptian scientist from NASA. Thank you, Mr. Isam. Dear audience, by this we conclude our seminar. Thank you for following us, and we hope to see you again. Thank you very much, Mr. William. You are off air now.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. John Martin. You are off air now. Thank you very much, Mr.